go ahead and buckle up because I'm going to reveal my roller coaster ride of a city boy who was raised in the sweltering streets of Phoenix, Arizona, and how I traded that all in for the serene landscapes of North Idaho. Now, my journey is filled with unexpected twists, taking me from a Phoenix police officer to a top producing real estate professional right here in North Idaho. But before we go into my story, if you've ever thought about relocating to North Idaho, go ahead and reach out to me. My calendar link is in the description below, along with my email and phone number, which you can call or text me on. Phoenix is huge, and I mainly grew up in the 80s, late 80s into the 90s, and it is not the same city that I grew up in. It is massive now. It was big when I was growing up, but now it's huge. There's so many people, all the suburbs, they're connected, and it's just one big concrete jungle. Now, the community that I grew up in is called Ahwatukee, and it was this own little section of Phoenix that was kind of separated because to the north, you had South Mountain State Park, which, interesting fact, is the largest state park in the United States. And then to the south, we had Indian Reservation, but there was a huge buffer from any of their development to the casino, which was a few miles down the road, and we really didn't hear, and it really didn't affect our community. So we were pretty isolated for being in such a big city. And it was a great place to grow up because we had this massive mountain that we could go explore. We had the Indian Reservation that we could sneak onto and have a lot of fun with. There was a ton of golf courses, pools, a bunch of amenities in this small town and, well, community really. But Phoenix and Tempe and Mesa and all Scottsdale, that was all very, very close to us. We were in this like four-corner part where all these different suburbs met. And growing up, I had the best mom. And I know that everybody says this, but I'm sorry, you're wrong. I had the best mom. She was superwoman. She cooked every single meal except on Fridays, because on Fridays was pizza and movie night. We would go to this restaurant called Nello's. We would grab our pizza, we would eat there, and then right next door was Blockbuster, if you remember, or even if you know what that is. You know, they had all the movies, the latest movies in the store. We would pick out a couple, we would head home, which was only a quarter of a mile down the road, and we would watch our weekly movie. But every other day, she cooked us dinner and breakfast most of the time too. And she was amazing because she would clean up all the dishes. Not a single dish was left for the next day or even later in that day. She cleaned up right away and the house was just immaculate. It was perfect. Nothing was out of place, not even a pair of shoes. The work ethic and morals that my mom gave me laid the foundation of who I am today. And one thing that I can point to early on growing up, every Saturday was chores. It didn't matter what was going on. If there was a birthday party, an event, we had to do chores on Saturday morning. And you already heard me, the house was picked up and immaculate. So what the heck were we doing on a Saturday? Well, we deep cleaned, not in the spring, not in the fall, not in the winter. We deep cleaned every single Saturday, from tearing down the beds, washing the sheets, deep cleaning the bathroom, baseboards, dusting, you name it, we deep cleaned that house. And to further this of how clean and how meticulous my mom was, on Wednesday was the light clean day. We would vacuum and just do a little touch up around the house. That way when Saturday rolled around, we were already ahead of the game. Now, most of the time, you can tell a person's personality based on what they do. And my mom, she was a CPA, so you know she was dialed in on everything, meticulous and just accurate. Well, one summer, my parents, they went to Europe on a vacation and they didn't take us kids. And I was like, yes, party time at the Geanetta house. So this was before we had smartphones. We had the clam phones that you folded in half and it flipped up. So because my mom knew where everything was, we took photos of the house and then we would move everything out of the way so nothing got broke or damaged. And then we would use the photos to put everything back, down to the angle of decor and picture frames, because she knew anytime something was out of place, she knew that somebody had changed it or altered it or moved something. And my mom, she was a big influence on my life. She knew that I wanted to be a police officer. So she helped me get into leadership roles and organizations, helped me with my studies, and made sure that I had a membership to the gym to stay fit. She did everything possible to allow me to reach my goals. I remember I was 8 or 9 and my mom, she has this picture of me, and we came across this police officer in Ahwatukee, and he was a motorcycle cop, and he was, I don't know, maybe off duty or writing a paper. I don't really remember, but we asked for a photo. He let me put on his helmet, his jacket, jump on the motorcycle. My mom took a photo of this, and we're going to jump ahead a little bit. When I graduated from the academy, she had this picture plastered on the cake. It was super cool. So once I was able to be old enough to join the academy and become a police officer, that's what I did. So I'm signed up, I'm in the academy, I'm going through Hell Week. And Hell Week is the instructors, they're yelling at you, they're disciplining you. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, you got disciplined and you had to sit in the invisible chair, run up discipline hill, do push-ups and all this just physical activity to drain you, to break you. Well, in the 3rd week of the academy, I find out that you have to be 21 upon graduation. And I did the math real quick as they're talking about this. I'm like, crap, I'm going to be 3 weeks shy of my 21st birthday. So I did the right thing, tell the instructor, and they kicked me back to the next class. And I had to do Hell Week all over again. It was not fun. And even though I had just experienced it, it did not make things any easier. Interesting enough, I became the youngest graduate of Phoenix Police Academy ever at 21 years of age and 4 days. Later that year, I married my high school sweetheart, Jessica, and she kept it really easy on me so I could never have an excuse for forgetting our anniversary. We got married on 8/8/8. A quick overview of what I did when I was a Phoenix police officer. I was on patrol the entire time, meaning I was answering radio calls from accidents to domestic violences, fights, robberies, anything that was actively happening, kidnappings. I was the first one on scene. Now, what encompasses patrol is training officers and training recruits, and I did a lot of that as well. I met some amazing friends, lifetime friends as a Phoenix police officer, and I was a part of a lot of really, really good squads. My first squad I was ever part of, and I think it was maybe the first week or two that I was assigned off of the training squad into an actual everyday squad. One of our squad mates, she got shot. Now, thankfully, she survived. The injuries were not that bad, and she went on to have a really good, long, prosperous career with the Phoenix Police Department. After that, it was pretty quiet. It was just your everyday routine fights and things, and it wasn't that exciting until 2011. It was the end of 2011, and we found out, Jessica and I found out, that we're having our first kid, Brooklyn. And after we found that out, it was New Year's Eve. I'm working, and I get in this big fight, and basically it was a domestic violence call. I show up, the dude was no longer there, and he tore the house up. He did a little bit of roughing up on his wife. I think it was his wife. I'm taking photos, I'm doing the investigation, and he comes back. And so I tell him to turn around, and I have a partner, she's there with me. Tell him to turn around. We start putting the handcuffs on. He starts tensing up, and it is on. Long story short, we end up going to the ground, and he falls on top of me, knocks the wind out of me. He bites my neck right on my jugular, and I have that image from Hannibal Lecter when he grabs the guy's neck and he rips out his artery. And so that's going through my head, and I just found out I'm having a kid, and this is like an oh shit situation. So I feel him pulling away from my neck, so I'm pushing into him. That way he can't rip anything out, and we'll go into town on this guy. So anyways, we finally get him in cuffs. He goes to jail. I have some injuries. They're not terrible, but because he didn't answer any questions as far as, is he HIV positive? Does he have any other communicable diseases that we needed to know about? I had to go on what we call it the cocktail, and it's a pill essentially that you take, and it just kills everything in your system. That way, if you did have a virus, since it didn't have time to multiply, the virus that is, this pill would kill everything. So I got super sick, and we're like, we're having a kid, what's going on? And thankfully, I don't have any of that stuff. The pill did what it was supposed to do, and honestly, I don't have any long-lasting injuries from that. So later in 2012, we did have our first child, Brooklyn, and it was crazy. I couldn't believe that a hospital was allowing my wife and I to leave with a child after 24 hours of her being born. We didn't know anything, and we're like, you're sending us home with a child, with another human being. We have no clue what we're doing. But I think we ended up being pretty good parents. Of course, my mom, grandma, she was thrilled. Brooklyn was not her first grandchild, but there was just a special connection that she had with Brooklyn. And Brooklyn even had a sleepover at grandma's house. But shortly after that, in the beginning part of 2013, my mom, she got sick. And she has some respiratory issues. She always had. I didn't know her in my 22 years on Earth of anything different. Mom, she was sick. She had a respiratory thing going on, and she would cough, and she would spit up this phlegm on a regular basis. So when she got sick, she was going through the same stuff that she always does, coughing, hacking stuff up. So we didn't think of anything of it. I remember picking up Brooklyn, and she was coughing. It's like, yeah, you're fine. Love you. I'm going to see you in a couple days. Well, I go to work and for the next couple days, and then I find out that my mom is really sick. She ends up going to the doctor, and she gets some medication. She starts improving. So it's like, hey, this was just a little bit worse than typical. All is well. However, a couple days later, she ends up in the emergency room. She actually had a lot of fluid buildup in her lungs, and because it had been sitting there for so long and this had progressed and nobody caught it, nobody knew what was going on, she went septic, and unfortunately my mom passed away in 2013. This by far was the most difficult day in my life, and even today in 2023, this was the most difficult day that I've ever had to deal with the grieving and just not having her there. She had always been there for me. She was my rock. She was, I'll admit it, my wife knows this. When I got off duty, my mom was the first person that I called and spoke to. Even if it was just for a minute, it was, hey, everything is good. I'm good. I hope you have a great day. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And that was no longer in my life. There was a huge void now just taken from me, and I didn't know why. And then you start thinking about, it's like, man, had we, and this is the crazy part, had we taken her to a different hospital, this other hospital had the machine and the technology to save her, but we took her to a hospital that was closer that did not have this technology, and she was in such a fragile state they could not airlift her to this other hospital to save her life. Like anything, time healed. It took a lot of time, but I'm finally accepting of what happened. I moved on with life, still think about her, still talk to her with my other kids about Grandma Wendy all the time. And one thing that really helped me with the grieving process was getting a tattoo in memory of her, essentially. It's kind of ironic because my mom was not a fan of tattoos. She never wanted me to have one. She always said if I got a tattoo, she would never help us with anything financially. I know if she was here still today, she would tell me, Ben, this was your last act to defy me, to just make me go, ah! Shortly after my mom passed away, the Phoenix Police Department started to show their true colors of not supporting their officers. They would train us to do a job, we would go out there and do it, and they would not have our back. I'll give you an example of that. I'm at the end of my shift, and my assigned parking spot with my Tahoe was the furthest away from the precinct doors. I don't care, it doesn't matter to me. But at the end of the shift, I park in my assigned parking spot, and we all know this is the end of the day. I got reports to write. I want to go home and see my family. So am I going to take the longest route to walk from my car into the precinct? No, I'm going to go the quickest way, and we all know what that is. It's walking diagonal through the cars to the front door. It's not walking down the aisle and then making a right 90-degree turn and going over to where the front door is. So I'm walking diagonally through these cars. My status on the computer that everybody can see is that I'm at the station writing, and another officer writes me up because a hot call came out at that time, and he was just getting on to shift, and he was in the parking lot going to his car as I was leaving my car going into the precinct. And he said I was dodging a call, that he saw me weaving and bobbing through these calls to avoid going to this priority call that just came out. Now, at the end of the investigation, I am told by the commander, which is one of the highest level ranking officers in our structure, he tells me, Ben, we are going to leave this investigation open for more information to come forth. And if it comes forth that you're guilty, you're going to get punished. If enough evidence comes forward that exonerates you, then we'll let this go away. But I pointed out to the command staff, from the sergeant, lieutenant to the commander, that this investigation, if you look at our guidelines, our policy that we are ran by, I have to be exonerated or found guilty, that this did not fit the criteria of leaving it pending. The commander tells me, yes, Ben, you are right. However, in this case, we are going to leave it open for you. So basically, my command staff is telling me that they can pick and choose which policies they want to enforce, what is in their best interest, meaning command staff. And if you've ever been part of a government agency and you worked for the government, you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to share another story with you that really illustrates what I'm talking about as far as the rules are applying when they want them to apply. And this affects me directly, now kind of indirectly, and you'll understand here in a second. So at this time, I'm an FTO, meaning I'm a field training officer, and I'm training new police officers. They're called officers in training, OITs. And a couple of these OITs that are on my squad, they're far enough in the process where they can ride solo. And we're going to evaluate them as a solo officer, meaning they don't have a training officer, an FTO like me, sitting next to them, holding their hand and walking them through everything. So a call comes out, neighborhood disturbance. These two OITs, they arrive in their separate vehicles. I arrive in my separate vehicle, and I'm just observing, like I'm supposed to do, on how they handle the call. And I do need to point out that I have an OIT of my own. So we have 3 officers. They're all OITs. They're handling this call by themselves, and I'm just sitting back, watching, monitoring, making sure they're safe, making sure they're following our rules and regulations and our policies. And we're there for 45 minutes, and they did a great job. They exhausted every angle, made sure that there was not a crime, was trying to come up with a solution to solve the issue so we didn't get called back. But since we didn't have a crime, we couldn't force anyone to do anything. So we made suggestions. Nobody took us up on our suggestions. We gave them resources on, hey, if you have a problem inside the house, here are some counselors that you can talk to. Here's a book of information to help you figure out your home domestic situation. Because it came in as a neighbor dispute, but it was an inner house fight. It wasn't domestic violence because there was no crime. It was just mom and son were arguing. So we all leave. I take my OIT with me. The other OITs, they go and do whatever they're doing. And my OIT and I, we start to write our reports for the night. And we're parked a couple miles away. Well, about 20 minutes after we left, we get a hot call, meaning a priority call, the highest priority that there is. We got to get there now. There's something actively going on, and it's not good. There was a shooting. Mom shot the son because the son he was drunk. He was, 45, 46, and he was being belligerent. Again, he didn't hit mom. He didn't break anything. He was just being belligerent again, and mom shot him. So there's an investigation, of course. There should be. The department needed to point the finger at somebody because we had a shooting. We had a mom who was in her 70s shoot her son who was in his 40s. There needed to be somebody responsible. And in the investigation, they told me that I was going to be that person because the OITs, if they were found responsible, it's an immediate fire. And at this time, and actually still to this day, Phoenix PD had a huge manpower crisis. They didn't have enough officers, and they weren't bringing in enough officers to replace the retirees. So they couldn't afford to lose any OITs. But for me, this was just a hand slap. I was going to survive this. And this was fine. At this time, I knew that I was going to be moving to North Idaho, and I was tired of fighting the department on their corruption, essentially, of not following policy. And I took my punishment, I moved on, and we moved to North Idaho. Now, backing up in this story just a little bit, my wife and I and our kids were visiting some family in Colorado, and they always live in small towns. And this was a couple years after my mom passed away. And I just make a joke to Jessica, and I say, hey, maybe we could buy a house here. We get on Zillow. Of course, we get on Zillow. Who doesn't? And I'm looking at the house price, and it's like, damn, we can buy the street. Like, these houses are dirt cheap. And I was just kidding. But then, of course, curiosity killed the cat. we start looking in other parts of the country, and then we have this idea of moving out of Phoenix, and it was just a big snowball effect. And of course we did it. My wife, she grew up in a small farming community. I never enjoyed living in the big city, even though we were in Ahwatukee in the smaller community. I never really liked living in a big city. It's too many people. So our heads just start spinning. It's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's move out of Phoenix, but let's do it now, because I'm going to be hitting 10 years here pretty soon. And every year past 10 years, getting closer to 20 years, when I can retire and have a pension and have all those benefits, it's going to be that much harder to leave the force. So we had this goal of, at the 10-year mark, we need to be out of Phoenix, or at least really close to the 10-year mark. So as we're approaching to leaving Idaho, we have a couple more kids. We have Cadence and then Maverick, and my wife, she was finishing up nursing school. And when we were making the transition to North Idaho, it's like, man, we both can't be having demanding jobs. You're going to be a nurse. I could be a police officer up in North Idaho, but that's two demanding jobs. We are going to miss out on our kids. We're going to hire somebody to basically babysit our kids, to raise our kids. And one reason why we want to get out of Phoenix is to spend more quality family time together. So what was I going to do if I was not going to be a police officer? That's basically my only job, real job I've ever had. I'll be honest with you. I loved when we had house alarms, especially when I worked in some of the nicer parts of Phoenix, because I got to go in, and after we cleared and made sure it was safe and there was no crime, then, hey, look at this is how they decorate. Wow, this is a cool layout. Really enjoyed that. Plus, on top of that, Jessica and I, we bought a few houses that needed some fixing. We fixed them, we redid them, we sold them, we made some decent money on it. So it's like, hey, we both like real estate. We've been successful in it. Why not give this a chance? This will really free up my schedule and give me time to be flexible with the kids if they have sports events or anything like that. So before we moved up to North Idaho, I flew up here, I got my real estate license, and for the last 2 years before we moved to North Idaho, I actually came back every single quarter to make sure that this is somewhere that we wanted to be. Do we love it? Do we like winter? Do we like spring, summer, fall, all of it? Is it going to work for us? And obviously it did, because that's where we've been for the last 6 years. So when I first got here to North Idaho, I went to Century 21 Riverstone. And I chose that brokerage because one of the agents there, she helped me buy my first piece of land up here. I knew her, I liked her, thought she did a good job. So I signed on with them, and I did really well. I became a top producer, but I knew it was time for me to move on because I wasn't getting exactly what I needed from that company. So then I went to a smaller company called Evergreen, and I flourished there. I did really well. I was more on my own, which was great. I got the support I needed, but there was still something missing. So I was only there for a year, and then I was like, this isn't me. This isn't where I need to be. This isn't my calling. What am I missing? And I was missing training. As a Phoenix police officer, we trained all the time. And the brokerages that I knew of in town, the ones that I was part of, they didn't have adequate training. They were not providing the support to agents to be successful. And I wanted to change that. I really enjoyed training OITs. When I was younger, I was part of Boy Scouts, and my mom, she really pushed for me to do that because there was the leadership skills that you could build at such a young age. And I was the troop leader or assistant troop leader for several years when I was in Boy Scouts, and I enjoyed helping people, being in charge and guiding them. And again, in the police world, I really enjoyed that. So knowing that there was a problem up here with training and producing good agents, everyone, not just one or two, but everyone, that's what I wanted to do. So then I found EXP, and this company allowed me to start my own company under their umbrella and run a brokerage how I saw fit. And so we really rely heavily on training. I have agents that I'm helping grow and help their business go to places that they couldn't get it to. So that's been really fulfilling for me. I'm asked quite often, do I miss Arizona? And the quick answer is no. It comes out of my mouth so quickly, no, I do not. North Idaho is home. It's my calling to be up here in the woods, in the mountains. I have so many recreational activities around me where if I was in Phoenix or many parts of the country, I would have to drive quite a long ways to get to these amenities and recreational activities. And no, on top of that, no, I don't see myself going back. I got 10 acres up here. I got cows, I got horses, pigs, chickens, turkeys, dogs, cats, everything. We're looking to expand to get some alpacas, and I can't have that in Arizona. I guess I could, but again, I'm not in North Idaho. I'm not in this amazing state with all these recreational activities that the family and I like to partake in. And it's kind of funny because when we moved up here, when we announced it to our friends and family, Jessica and I got so much negative feedback because we didn't have family, we didn't have friends, we didn't have connections to Idaho. We moved up here with 0 connections, with the exception of a second cousin of mine that I met when I was like this big. I called him up and I said, hey, can I stay at your house for a couple weeks while I come up and visit? And he said, yeah. So I reconnected with the cousin, but somebody basically was a stranger that I called up and said, can I stay at your house? So if you want to call that a connection, be my guest, but I don't. But in the 6 years that we've been here, we have made so many friends that we actually consider family now. Everyone up here, they're so nice and they're friendly. It's easy to make connections up here if you just put your foot out there. If you've moved to North Idaho, leave me a comment below and let me know what your experience was like. I would love to hear your story. Well, there you have it, my unlikely story on moving to North Idaho. From a Phoenix police officer trading in the badge to selling homes. And I want you to watch out for the next video because I'm going to discuss things that you should know before moving to Sandpoint, Idaho.